All right, we're going to go over the internals of a multi-spindle head repair here. Nicholas already did the external evaluation on this head. He pulled the bolts out of there. He inspected the rear drive tang, which in this case is going to be so worn that if the head's repairable, we're going to insist on replacing that. And another thing we found on this head was that spindle number 6 had a good amount of vertical play, unlike the rest of the spindles, and we're going to check the bearing journals on this one very closely to make sure they're not worn out beyond their ability to support the bearings properly. So for now, we're just going to finish cracking this head open. First thing I'm going to do is take this adapter off. Let's go over some tools though, real quickly. Some tools you're going to want: a metric set of Allen keys. We're going to call these our sacrificial pieces of metal. We'll get to that. A 1/2-inch socket on an impact driver piece, bearing puller for the 1/2-inch socket, and then a manual bearing puller. Some skinny flat bars, just a plastic spatula, a large metric wrench, a couple of the adjustable wrenches, and a set of Allen bits for the impact drivers. You probably want a caliper, a small screwdriver. This is handy as well for cutting the seams on the head to help break it open. But for now, I'm going to zip the adapter off and talk about the next steps. There's two different kinds of heads. The head that we're looking at right now is the old style, which is a good example for us because it's one of the worst ones in terms of sorting things out. Oh, that came right off. So with this head on the input driver, there's a bolt, and on some heads that bolt has to be removed before the head can be taken apart. If you don't pull that screw off and pull this off, you're going to literally rip the internals of the head trying to disassemble it. So we're going to go ahead and try to get that off of there, and I'm just going to switch my bits here and try to keep them in order so we don't lose track. Oh, I need a battery for that process. Here we are. Impact drivers make this all better. You can use hand tools, but then you have to hold things with a counterbalancing wrench to get it to work. And this one doesn't want to come. And so a few different things I can do. Take the tail end of one of these guys, and there's a hole right there. I can try to get a little leverage on it and see if I can't get it to come up. And it doesn't really want to come for me, and that's okay. And there's really no lip on this guy to grab, but it does look to me like this is one of the style that can pass through the housing. And since I've removed the screw, I'm going to trust that as I start to break this head open, if it needs to, it's going to break its way loose. I could spend a long time trying to fight this out, but it doesn't want to come right now, and there's a lot of rust here. One thing I will say though, now that we've taken that adapter off, we can see that this piece is swimming. So I'm going to go ahead and make a note that the input bearings are shot. A good pen is definitely something you want for this process, and a sheet to write on where you don't have to hold it too much. So the input adapter condition, a lot of wear. Play laterally, and I can spell, I promise. And I'm going to say the bearing is failed. And there may be other things failed too, but for now, at least I know that that bearing is shot, and that's going to be something I'm going to peek for when I get inside. So we're going to flip it over. On this particular head, normally there's some button head screws that cover what we call a jack screw hole, and that's a hole that's a blind hole that doesn't go into the back part of the housing, but it's threaded in the front part. And we have these jack screws here. That's an Allen key on one side and just kind of a point on the other. We're going to thread those into these holes and run them in. Now, this is one of those steps where I'm going to use a tool that makes it faster, but using this tool kind of hinges on your comfort. If you've got a very good sense of touch on this tool and you can run it carefully, then you can use this tool to save some time and effort. However, it's very, very important when we start to jack this head up that we jack it evenly across all the way around so that this comes off squarely, and we're only doing that from 2 points. So if I go hard here, it's going to tip like this. If I go hard there, it's going to tip like that. Either of those scenarios makes the bearings bind in their journals and can damage the head while I'm taking it apart. And so what I'm probably going to start by doing in this case is take the small wrench that I had, and I'm going to do matching turns, half, and I'm just going 180 degrees, half, half, and I ran them down to touch with the other tool. And this kind of guarantees that I'm not going more on one side than on the other, but I am feeling a lot more tension on one side than the other. So this side is giving me a lot of tension, and I'm gonna take a look and see how is my gap going here. And I can see that I've got a wider gap there than here. So I'm gonna try to help it out a little bit with that, keep things nice and even. Now it's even again, come back over and keep going. Now I can feel the tension is starting to break loose on both sides. So, and I'll just keep going half and half. And as long as I'm progressing nicely here, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the tool and just do little matching sets. And I'm going to keep an eye on it, make sure things look square, and they do. You can see things are starting to come apart, which is good. So I'm just going to keep going. Now this old style head, you'll notice has seals that have exposed transfer spindles. That's going to come into play with how we take the head apart. It's also going to come into play with our decisions of whether or not to rebuild this head. Now, we've got a good bit of space in there. I probably could have done this a little sooner, but what I'm going to do is start using those sacrificial pieces of metal. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to back these guys off now. And I'm just going to put this piece of metal in my gap, and I'm going to use that to press against, because the jack screws do actually damage the other side of the housing. And we can fix it with a file, but I prefer to damage it as little as possible. And I'm starting to get a little crooked, so I'm going to try to balance that out again. And if you're ever starting to get crooked and it doesn't want to balance, you can always back off or try to use a little bit of a rubber mallet if it doesn't want to lever, and just hit the opposite side. It doesn't, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. Back it off a little. I felt that go back to straight. So, put my sacrificial metal back in there. It's still binding up in this corner. So we're going to back off, and I'm going to work on this, and we'll describe what we did to get past it. So go ahead and pause that for a minute.